because under the rule of the Obama administration, the CIA has the ability to place anyone, including American citizens, deemed as a national security threat on what is known as a kill list.
And of course, it's not just the Obama administration, it's the continuation from the previous puppet administration. And of course, it's not officially done by the United States government. Things like this are pulled off by rogue elements within the intelligence and military networks. They're compartmentalized, they're fractionalized. And perhaps in this case of Matt Simmons, perhaps it was an insider blowing the whistle a little too loudly and insistently on BP. And again, these questions of nuke weapons and Corexit and all of the things swirling around the Gulf oil spill that unfortunately we're not going to know about until a bit more time goes by. But again, I implore you to check out all of the links in here, sourcing out, sussing out this story as best we can. Again, he drowned, or it was a heart attack, or he had a heart attack and was drowned, or was he CIA-ated? Or was he old dude, old oil guy who spent too long in the hot tub and his heart burst? We shall see. Matthew Simmons, CFR, oil insider, BP critic, dead of quote-unquote heart attack. We jump to a couple of the other deaths in the last week. Former Alaska Senator Ted Stevens dies in plane crash. Plane carrying former Senator Ted Stevens and ex-NASA chief Sean O'Keefe crashed near a remote fishing village in Alaska, killing the longtime senator and at least 4 others, this being early reportage from the Associated Press. Crash, a stunning event in the state where Stevens became the most beloved political figure in Alaska history during his 40 years in the Senate, earning a reputation as a tireless advocate for projects that brought millions of federal dollars to the state. There are more links to flesh this story out on who was in the crash and who passed away, and of course the NASA connections, and there are links that we can really get the on-the-ground take from Sarah Palin and a lot of other things from MSNBC. However, you might remember Ted Stevens as noting that the internet isn't like a truck, it's a series of tubes. However, showing yet again it's all related. We'll send you to godlikeproductions.com, which is essentially a forum. And again, I don't generally recommend spending any amount of time on forums or comment boards. But this brings out the pertinent point. And it sources back to Huffington Post and Associated Press earlier in the year. Ted Stevens knew British Petroleum cheated on their BOP tests, the blowout preventer tests. Chew on that. The other related update, former Illinois Representative Dan Rostenkowski dies at the age of 82. More on that from the Washington Times. The Matt Simmons situation is indeed a fishy one. However, I'm not saying the same about either Stevens or Rostenkowski. Again, we don't want to try and be the kind of outlet that cries wolf, says everything is an inside job. We tend to sniff out where the good data sends us. And a lot of these stories, and as you start to do all this more and more and more and become hopefully more media literate, and again, it takes time. Although, yes, we'd maybe also just like to go Luddite and go start a farm somewhere. But until that day, becoming more media literate, seeing what's going on, seeing how these things play out. It's not everything that's a false flag. It's not everything that's a conspiracy. But when you do this for a while, you'll start to see and notice those signs that you see in the early reporting of events. And you'll start to see the stories change. Again, save your articles. Finally, on MediaMonarchy.com, before we hit all the other related alternative news sites from my own and others that I admire, let's get an interesting, brutal take from Niall Gardner, writing on The Telegraph. that the Obama presidency resembles a modern-day ancien régime, or essentially an ancient regime. More on that in just a moment. So the backdrop to this is that while Obama is preaching sacrifice, his family is frolicking in Spain, as we covered last week. But Niall Gardner, writing for The Telegraph, notes, what the French historian Alexis de Tocqueville would make of today's Obama administration were he alive today is anyone's guess. But I would wager that the author of L'Ancien Régime and Democracy in America would be less than impressed with the extravagance and arrogance on display among the White House elites that rule America as though they've been handed some divine right to govern with impunity. We've, of course, already noted the bloodlines. It's the kind of impunity that's been highlighted on the world stage this past week by Obama's hugely costly trip to Spain, which prompted New York Post columnist Andrea Tantaros to dub the First Lady a contemporary Marie Antoinette. As we noted last week, let them eat cake, or let them eat Corexit. As the Telegraph reports, while the Obamas are covering their own vacation expenses, such as accommodation, the trip may cost U.S. taxpayers as much as $375,000 in terms of Secret Service security and flight costs on Air Force Two. But the timing of this lavish European vacation could not have come at a worse moment when unemployment in America stands at 10% and large numbers of Americans are fighting to survive financially in the wake of the global economic downturn. It sends a message of indifference, even contempt, for the millions of Americans who are struggling just to feed their families on a daily basis and pay the mortgage, while the size of the national debt balloons to Greek-style proportions. There it is again, referencing the Greek situation as analogous to our own here in the crumbling Western order. I thought Obama was going to pay people's mortgages and hand out free housing and again, do all these things that we see the signs and the dots and the puzzle pieces connecting. That article goes on, and again, these are things that we've gone over this and previous weeks as the polls go down, and we have Clinton insiders saying, well, I think ultimately Obama and the Democrats are probably sunk for the midterm elections this November. Unless, of course, there's a terror attack like 9/11. Let's get the rest of the obamessiah updates from The Guardian and from thehill.com. Robert Gibbs, of course, mouthpiece, the current mouthpiece, and as we've always noted, it's entertaining to watch how quickly sometimes these people can turn over as they can only get out and lie so much and maintain any kind of credibility if they ever had any to begin with. But anyway, Gibbs noted that left-wing critics of Obama ought to be drug tested. White House unloads anger over criticism from the professional left. And there's a lot of truth in this. And this is what's interesting, and that's why we say the most effective way to attack this current puppet with a D after his name, again, as opposed to the previous puppet with an R after his name, is attack him from the left, his supposed support. That isn't really there. It's ghosted. White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs says Obama's critics on the left are crazy and then tries to apologize. I hear these people saying he's like George Bush. Those people ought to be drug tested. I mean, it's crazy. But of course, there is something to say about the professional left. As we've noted time and time again, these are the foundation-funded left gatekeeping media outlets who essentially keep the fake left-right paradigm propped up. And they support all these ghouls, again, rah-rah for my team, and it's all divide and conquer. That's all you'll see on the foundation-funded blogs and media sites is only attacking that other team. That's what they do. That's how they do it. Another great one on veteranstoday.com, and we have noted this in the past, but of course it's always worth mentioning again and again and again. And it goes deeper, but let's get into, again, remind you of Obama's CIA pedigree, and of course we reported in the last year that Obama's more than 1 year employment by a CIA front operation called Business International Corporation, BIC of New York, after his graduation from Columbia in 1983. However, the State Department's recent revelation in response to a FOIA request that the pre-65 passport files of Obama's mother, Stanley Ann Dunham Soetoro, were destroyed in the 80s that we mentioned and reported last week to you, reignited suspicions that Obama's mother worked for the CIA under non-official cover in Indonesia while married to Lolo Soetoro, a retired colonel in General Suharto's CIA-backed ranks. It's all so cozy, isn't it, friends? Barry Soetoro's political dynasty crashing and burning again, barring some sort of catalyzing catastrophic event that we may get before November, some sort of October surprise. And that's how the game rolls on.